Have you ever noticed that when you're trying really hard to be clear, you sometimes end up making things worse? It's this strange paradox, right? We think adding more words, more details will build trust and make our point, but a lot of the time, it does the exact opposite. It can actually undermine what we're trying to say. To really get to the bottom of this, we've got to start with a pretty weird question.
Yep, you heard me right. A peacock. I know it sounds a little out there, but trust me, that ridiculous, beautiful, over-the-top tail holds a huge secret about how we build and sometimes accidentally break trust when we communicate. It all comes down to sending a signal that's just too expensive to fake.
So, let's dive into this. We're going to start by looking at this really powerful idea from evolutionary biology called the peacock's costly signal.
Okay, so at the very heart of this whole peacock thing is something called signaling theory, and the main idea is actually pretty simple. For any signal to be believable, it has to be hard to pull off. It needs to have a cost. And why? Well, because that cost is what separates the honest ones from the fakers.
Think about that tail. It's not just for looking good. Growing it takes a ton of energy, and dragging it around makes it a massive target for predators. It's literally a handicap. But get this, that's the whole point. Only a really healthy, genetically superior peacock can afford a handicap like that. A weaker one just couldn't manage it. So the very cost of the signal is what guarantees that it's an honest one.
And at the end of the day, in the natural world, reliability is everything. The cost makes the signal trustworthy. The peahen doesn't need a long speech or a detailed resume. The tail says it all, precisely because of how much it costs to have it.
Okay, so peacocks are cool. But how does this whole thing apply to us? Well, it turns out our brains are basically wired for this less is more principle. It all comes down to how your brain handles information.
I mean, really think about it for a second. Why does one clear, confident statement from a leader feel so much more trustworthy than a long, rambling explanation that's full of excuses and justifications?
The answer is actually incredibly simple. It's because your brain is on a budget.
No, seriously, your brain has a strict energy budget. Processing information is one of the most expensive things it does. In fact, just to transmit a single bit of information can cost up to 10 million molecules of ATP, which is basically our body's energy currency. So to save all that precious energy, our brains are always looking for the most efficient signals, not ones that drown them in a sea of useless data.
This biological need for efficiency leads to this really interesting mental shortcut, or bias, called the dilution effect. Here's how it works. When you mix strong, important information with weak, irrelevant fluff, the fluff doesn't just get ignored. It actually weakens the important stuff. It literally waters down your message.
Let me show you exactly how this plays out. It's a classic experiment. I'm going to show you two students, and you tell me which one seems like a better bet for getting a high GPA. You ready?
All right, so here they are. Student A studies 31 hours a week. Simple enough. Student B also studies 31 hours a week, but we're also told they play tennis and have 3 siblings, so who's more likely to have that high GPA? Almost everyone picks student A, but why? They both study the same amount. It's because those extra, totally irrelevant details about student B actually dilute the impact of the most important fact. That is your brain on over-explanation.
So we've pretty much established that over-explaining just doesn't work for the person listening. Which of course brings us to the million-dollar question. If it's so bad, why on earth do we do it all the time?
Well, the answer has almost nothing to do with the person we're talking to, and absolutely everything to do with what's going on inside our own heads.
See, over-explaining isn't really a communication strategy at all. It's a coping mechanism. It's an unconscious way we try to manage our own anxiety. We're afraid of being judged, or misunderstood, or maybe letting someone down. So we just flood the conversation with words, hoping that we can somehow control how they see us. For some people, it can even be a learned behavior from the past. A way to keep people happy and avoid conflict no matter what.
And this habit, it can be especially damaging in a professional setting, especially for leaders, because that's when transparency can quickly turn into just plain noise.
This quote just nails it, doesn't it? A leader might think they're building trust by walking everyone through every single detail of their thought process. But what the team often hears is hesitation, a lack of confidence.
And here's that disconnect in action. The leader's goal, their intention, is a good one. Build trust, be clear, show they know what they're doing. But what the team actually experiences is the complete opposite. They see insecurity, they feel confused, and they start to question if the leader's really competent. All that extra detail doesn't create clarity, it just creates confusion.
Researchers actually have a name for this, the fallacy of transparency. And it's another one of those paradoxes. The more a leader feels like they have to talk about being transparent, the less their team actually trusts them. Real transparency isn't something you announce. It's something you demonstrate through clear, confident, and concise action.
So, what's the fix? How do we break this habit? The solution isn't to just be blunt or cold. It's to learn how to lead with what you might call intelligent clarity.
Here are 5 really powerful habits you can build. First, always lead with the bottom line. Don't make people dig for the main point. Second, resist that powerful urge to justify and defend your position. Trust your team. If they have questions, they'll ask. Third, leave space for dialogue. You know that awkward silence you're so desperate to fill? Don't. That's where the real conversation happens. Fourth, and this is a big one, check your motivation. Are you saying this for their clarity or for your own comfort? And finally, train your team to think critically. Teach them how to think, not just what to think, so they won't need every little detail spelled out for them.
Honestly, it might all just come down to this one question. Before you launch into that long explanation, just pause for a second and ask yourself, am I saying this for clarity or for comfort? Is this really for them, or is this just to make myself feel less anxious? The answer can be incredibly revealing.
Ultimately, it goes right back to the peacock. The most powerful signals are the ones that are clear, confident, and don't need a ton of justification. Trust isn't built by saying everything you can possibly think of. It's built by making sure that everything you do say actually matters.